Herzlich willkommen zur
Very warm welcome to the 25th Foreign Policy Conference.
Ich bitte Sie langsam Platz zu nehmen,
Please be seated
sodass wir beginnen
so that we can start.
Noch einmal guten Morgen und herzlich willkommen.
Once again, a very good morning and a warm welcome to the 25th Foreign Policy Conference of Heinrich-Böll Foundation. My name is Vera Benata, and since the start of this year, I'm a desk head for foreign and security policy. I'm very happy that you have accepted our invitation to this 25th anniversary conference in such a great number. Before I pass the floor to Philipp Albrecht, our executive board member, I would like to give you a short piece of information, suggestion if you like. Maybe you will not just use the breaks for an exchange between each other today, but also take a moment to be inspired and talk to by the people in our international network of Böll. We have a few portraits here, and they are meant to involve you in the debate. As some of you may have seen on the occasion of this conference today and in the next few days, we will exhibit Gianluca Constantini. With his works of art, we not just want to send out artistic signals, but also civil society players who work in favor of the topics of our conference every day, that is peace, freedom and security. We want to give these artists a platform. These voices remind us of the fact that foreign policy and especially the work on long-term peace do not just take place at government level. Such work comes about and often mainly in networks, in local movements, in local initiatives, where people, despite all the pushback, use their weight for a more just and peaceful world. We hope that these voices can be lived up to by our discussions. It's also a particular honor that the artist himself can also be here today. Gianluca, thank you for your valuable and inspiring contribution to this conference.
Und zuletzt noch drei kurze
And before I wrap up, three short points as to organization today. Excuse me. So we have quite a crowd here. We also have live transmission on the in the lobby on the stairs. Conference languages are German and English. So you may choose between German and English and get headphones for this purpose. So during the conference, I'm available with my colleagues Philipp and Marlene Heine. Please, if you have questions, feel free to turn to us. I would like to thank you once more for participating in this conference and wish all of us open debates, critical reflection, and the readiness to rethink well-known concepts. Jan, the floor is yours.
Sehr geehrte Damen und Herren, liebe Freunde,
ladies and gentlemen, dear friends of Heinrich-Böll Foundation, dear colleagues, dear international guests, excellencies, dear guests, both here on site. Many of you are here. Thank you for that. And also welcome to the guests online on the stream. First of all, me too, I want to welcome you very warmly on behalf of Foundation. My name is Philipp Albrecht. I'm one of the two executive board members here. And first, I would also like to thank those who have paved the way to this conference. It's the 25th annual Foreign Policy Conference of Heinrich-Böll Foundation. A wonderful program has been set up. So many thanks also to you, Vera, and your team, and also thanks to the conference team for the organization.
Ein Jubiläum.
An anniversary, 25 years, the 25th edition, that not only gives us cause to look back, but above all calls on us to look to the future. When we launched this conference a quarter of a century ago, Europe was in a phase of upheaval. of new beginnings and of hope. Our first annual foreign policy conference in December 1999 coincided with the European Union's decision to create the position of an EU High Representative for Common Foreign and Security Policy. For the first time, the EU was given a face in foreign and security policy. Shortly afterwards, the Treaty of Nice paved the way for the enlargement of the EU from 15 to 27 member states in 2000. Never before had so many European countries been sovereign, democratic and equal members of the same political community. A community which, as stated in the justification for awarding the Nobel Peace Prize to the EU in 2012, had succeeded in transforming itself from a continent of wars to a continent of peace. The beginning of the new millennium thus also marked a phase characterized by hopes for a European and international security order based on cooperation rather than confrontation, for the irreversibility of the peace dividend and for a stronger role of the international community in protecting civilian populations. In 2000, the then Green Foreign Minister, Joschka Fischer, outlined the necessary steps towards a genuine European federation in a highly acclaimed speech at the local Humboldt University. In the same year, the Red-Green federal government adopted the first comprehensive concept for civil crisis prevention, conflict resolution and peace consolidation. Today, 25 years later, much of that hope, of that nascent consensus has been shattered here in Germany and in Europe. And with it, the concepts of peace and security have also been shaken. At the latest since Russia's annexation of Crimea in 2014, which was contrary to international law, and quite unambiguously since 24 February 2022, peace in Europe has come to an end. The European peace project has been shaken to its foundations. But this development does not stop at Europe's borders. According to the Peace Research Institute in Oslo, PRIO, 2024 was the most violent year since the end of the Second World War. Never before in the last 7 decades have so many internal and interstate conflicts been recorded. PRIO and many other peace researchers warn that what we are experiencing here is not a short-term escalation, it's a structural change. The world today is much more violent, much more fragmented than it was 10 years ago. This is evidenced not only by the numerous wars, conflicts and humanitarian disasters, whether in Ukraine, the Middle East, above all in Gaza, in Africa, for example in Sudan and in parts of Asia, but also the authoritarian shifts in power that we are seeing worldwide. Furthermore, the hybrid threats with which autocratic regimes deliberately destabilize our open societies through disinformation, attacks on our critical infrastructure, which we currently see, and political influence. The growing instrumentalization of technologies and resources, with energy, water, information and artificial intelligence becoming geopolitical levers. Social fragmentation, which threatens the internal cohesion of many societies, including in Europe. Also, the loss of trust in our institutions, which undermines political participation and strengthens populist forces. And the rapidly escalating climate crisis, which not only destroys livelihoods but also acts as a driver of conflict, both globally and locally. All of this creates uncertainty and arouses fears and concerns. It is therefore hardly surprising that calls for peace are growing louder at this time. However, we are seeing how the term peace itself is being politically appropriated and distorted internationally when heads of state boast about supposed peace negotiations and deals, like this happened again this week, deals which remain ineffective. But also here in Germany, when actors such as AfD or BSW political parties try to portray themselves as peace parties. The peace they demand is a cemetery peace, a silence of weapons at any expense. Robert Benson from the Center for American Progress describes this in his intervention his contribution to our dossier on the annual conference at this point. We would also like to recommend the articles with perspective from Syria, Sudan, Brussels, and Southeast Asia. So Benson writes, the authoritarian appropriation of peace follows a simple formula. Peace is redefined, not as the presence of justice, but as the absence of resistance to rule. According to this view, the world is best left to natural spheres of influence. Great powers take each other's interests into account, while smaller states accept subordination. But this is precisely what we must not allow to happen. If peace becomes a cover for violence, authoritarian control, or geopolitical blackmail, then we lose more than diplomatic agreements. We lose the normative basis of international politics as we shape it. The more the international order fragments and authoritarian ideas of peacekeeping gain ground, the more urgent it becomes for democratic forces to develop a new and clear countermodel. This is where the concept of peace in freedom comes in, a term that Alliance 90, the Greens, focused on in the 2025 federal election campaign. This term makes it clear that peace is only lasting and sustainable if it is based on pluralism, participation, and the protection of the most vulnerable, both internally and externally. Peace and freedom resists the false alternative between values and security. Or, in the words of one of our project partners from Syria, Hanadi, who is also part of our exhibition, peace means not only the absence of war, but the presence of justice and dignity. But how can we now reclaim peace and security from the interpretive authority of populist and authoritarian actors and re-anchor them in democratic freedom, justice, pluralism, and human rights? What common strategies and investments are necessary to restore and maintain lasting peace and freedom? From Lisbon to Luhansk and also beyond. How can we as societies become resilient and ward off the gray zone attacks on our free society that are already taking place? How can we reconcile our normative commitment to disarmament with the current need to strengthen military capabilities? Today, we would like to address these questions and tensions together with people from Africa, America, Asia, and Europe. People who are indeed confronted with these questions on a daily basis, in civil society, in active politics or diplomacy, in academia. They will certainly remind us that foreign policy is not a doctrine of moral purity. Day after day, it is a difficult struggle with ethical tensions, strategic dilemmas, and, yes, real costs. No country in Europe is fighting the current battle for peace and freedom as prominently and with such real painful costs as Ukraine. That is why it is a special honor for us to welcome Pavlo Klimkin as our first keynote speaker today. A warm welcome to you. Pavlo Klimkin was Ukraine's Minister of Foreign Affairs from 2014 to 2019. He also headed the foundation before, he also was close to the foundation before 2014, because as Ukrainian ambassador here in Berlin, he worked on the other side of the street between 2012 and 2014. At the time of the Revolution of Dignity, we were impressed, Pavlo, even before the tides turned in Kiev, and sometimes in talks to see Pavlo with protesters in the street. Our impression at the time was already that people and their striving for freedom were more important to you than obedience to those in power. You proved this on the big stage from 2014 onwards, at a time when foreign and security policy was already in crisis. Dear Pavlo, welcome back to your old neighborhood, which we hope still feels a bit like home. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Schönen guten Morgen. Mein Deutsch.
A very good morning. My German, after all these years, may be somewhere in the boondocks, and this is why I would switch to what we would call New German, that is English.
So good to have such a crowd. And I feel probably a bit honored, I have to say, to stay in front of you. And I really appreciate this invitation. It means a bit for me. And getting back does not mean just getting back to Berlin. When I was sort of humble and young diplomat in 1997 and got my first appointment in Bonn still, there was a funny tradition for any diplomat to be put in charge of one political party. I'm a physicist by education, I was young, and our ambassador, still a kind of half-Soviet guy, told me, okay, now you are in charge of the Greens. So he said, okay, Greens are probably not so important, weird guys, kind of about ecology, some good ideas, but nobody knows. And it's an interesting sense of all the links still going on for me, many personal links, especially this building where I had a lot of cafes. Coffee was probably not the best one, but conversations were always great. I mean, great. So it's a really good feeling to get back. And Jan, I would probably, because it's the early morning, everybody has his or her coffee, or probably a couple of them. I will start with a couple of points. I, of course, try to write a sort of smart flow for my keynote, but I really would love to start where you've just ended up. Firstly, and it's not just a formal point to everybody here. For me, as a Ukrainian citizen, thanks for standing with Ukraine. And it's not about getting a bit more tired. It's not about getting a bit more distracted, because it's a lot going on. A lot going on where you need your focus. You need your emotion. You need your personal life. But keep standing. It means a lot for us. It's something what we feel where we are under another strike, where we go to one of the cathedrals for all the ceremonies where someone of us got a kind of last prayer. And it's something which is important for everybody, because us Ukrainians, we can't have the same emotion as everybody else. We have binary mentality, let me put it this way. For us, it's about yes and no. For us, it's about victory or defeat. You can say, okay, guys, it's probably too simple. Life can be lived in this way, but we do. We live our life exactly in this way during the war, and it's important to feel not just all the smart flows and smart arguments, but also our emotions. And when I welcome my friends, our friends in Kyiv, in Lviv, in Odessa, in Kharkiv, from here, talking about many, many things, it's important for me personally. So let me make 3 points, probably 3.5. And after that, we can start sort of free flow discussion without hedging it out. We live still in a kind of multilateral reality. International law is still there. It's not a kind of virtual reality fake. It's still there. All the conventions are still there. You can download them. You can read them. You can try to apply them. International humanitarian law is still there. And actually, Heinrich-Böll-Stiftung, has been doing a lot in the sense of pushing it through. But ask yourself, what is the sense of what we've been doing? Such law application is totally fragmented, in the sense I can do it here, I can do it there, and in between, so what? So fundamentally, we still live in a multilateral reality, which is fragmented. But we already live in a kind of multipolar reality. I can play with terminology, but where big guys believe they are somehow better than the others, they can do more impact in whatever way. And the difference from the multilateral world, where we have the system of agreements, which are always done bona fide, in good faith, is that multipolar world is about deals. I hear, and it's also some of people I know here in Germany, in Italy, sometimes telling me, look, Pavlo, it's so difficult now. Maybe we need to have a deal. Let's discuss it. And I said, okay, I'm open-minded. But you can have a deal for a sort of ceasefire. Ask yourself whether it could be sustainable. Not just durable, you understand the difference, but sustainable on the basis of such a deal. The answer is no. Whether it can be just on the basis of such a deal, the answer is no. And my point to everybody who keeps trying to come up with this, kind of smart-looking idea about let's make a deal. It's not sustainable. It's not just. So you can have a deal about ceasefire, but in some moment in time, you're going to get even in a bigger trouble. And it's my experience after almost 30 years in diplomacy and many years in politics. And now we've been getting closer to a sort of third different reality, what I would call multi-order world. If you see what's rotating now, what's been shaping up, in the sense of Shanghai Security Organization or other realities, it's probably all kind of loose, still areas where you have different set of rules, different order. Whether orders can be compatible, yes, probably. Many of you have Apple, many of you have Android. It's up to you to decide. It's our freedom. At the end of the day, it's all compatible. We can live in a kind of world where compatibility is probably there, but on the basis of a deal, not on the basis of the agreement, and you understand my difference. So why I've been talking about all this probably looking semi-theoretical reality? I believe what we can call now in the sense of world we are in, is a sort of hybrid reality. It's a hybrid world. It's multilateral, multipolar, multi-order, maybe something else. But ask yourself, if we live in a kind of hybrid world, is a sort of hybrid war a one-off or new normality? And it seems now that it's a kind of new normality. And maybe, and I keep provoking you for a kind of good discussion with Jan. I mean, it's, Monday morning in Berlin. Maybe a sort of hybrid peace should be our dream in this world, in a different world. Because when I was a kind of young guy, I'm a physicist, as I've told you, by education. My professor of quantum mechanics told me a joke about Albert Einstein, teaching then in the Zurich University and kind of distributed different tasks for his physics exam. And one of the students raised his hand, kind of wavery, and said, "But professor, these are kind of same tasks you gave us 2 years ago for our exam." And Einstein said, "Fine, but the answers are different." So my point, the answers are different. And if hybrid war is something which is not one-off anymore, my point, let's get prepared for it. I got in the today's good morning, I mean, guten Morgen, air, I mean, Sendung, a kind of point from the German defense minister, Boris Pistorius, a kind of funny one. I don't know whether I like this point. He said, you know, we are not, we are in a hybrid war. Not war, we are not in a hybrid war, but we are not really in a peace again. So where we are, it's my point. For Ukrainians, with our binary mentality, we either here or there, where all of you actually are. And it's not sort of mundane point from the past. So fundamentally, we need to ask ourselves whether we have to get prepared. And I'll come to that in 5 minutes. My second point, only 3 points for starting today, no worry. I mean, I have a flow in my computer for a good of conversation, but not what I'm gonna start. What is at stake for main players now? What is at stake for Ukraine? I don't know whether we are main player, and I don't know whether we want to be really a main player. But I fear we have to, and I'm gonna explain you why. For us, what is at stake is our mere existence, because the reason why Russia keeps attacking Ukraine, and we have this war going on not from 2022. We have this war going from 2014 in a hot phase. But the real hybrid war against Ukraine started in 2003, where Russia wanted to impose on ourselves so-called single economic space, a sort of fundamental dependence on our economy, on Moscow, but also to get all kind of critical infrastructure, including gas transit, whatever. And I was part of these negotiations. We were able to rebound it successfully. And many of you who follow the history and international politics kind of remember too well what happened afterwards. 2004, Orange Revolution, Yanukovych. I mean, the history is very much known. A lot of good articles. No, not a lot of good articles, some good articles. have been written about it. So for Russia, as many here believe, and rightly so, it's about their imperial drive. Yes, for sure. It's about the stability of the regime in Moscow. Yes, for sure. But it's more. And it's about the fundamental idea, fundamentally new narrative in Russia, about a sort of state/civilization. In some moment in time, the leadership of Russia decided the idea of an empire is something falling short of their narrative, how to stabilize Russia and how to make it a sort of player in the world of the 21st century. Not in the world of the 20th century, but in the world of the 21st century. And if it's the case, Russia as a civilization can't exist without Ukraine. Ukraine in this concept does not exist as such. Ukraine does not have any history, any language, any statehood, basically nothing. And Ukrainians are kind of wrong, ill-fated Russians, which should be kind of drilled in the sense of getting back to sort of normal Russians. And it's important to understand. So fundamentally, this war, going from 2014, is not about security. Because it's a funny point how a nuclear state can feel threatened by someone like Ukraine, whatever. You can make any sort of points about proxy war. But the fundamental point is about pretending we can get back, and we can get back on scale. The result of this getting back is that now Ukraine is, not legally, but at least politically, part of Europe, because we've got the sense and the idea how to join the European Union, and got the candidate status. And Russia officially said in its foreign policy strategy that Russia is not a European state anymore. So in a kind of oversimplified reality, the borders of Europe have been shifted from our west border to our eastern border. And the whole concept of Europe has been reshuffled. But unfortunately, still Europe, and I'm saying it as a Ukrainian, and as a proud Ukrainian, but also as a European and proud European, we are still, as Europeans, not able to use it in the sense of pushing Europe in the 21st century. What is at stake for others, for big players like US or China? It's about deals, how to manage the future world. I mean, if you need peace through strengths, you can execute your strengths on the basis of a deal, which is possible. You can execute it on the basis of agreements. Again, whether deals can be something sustainable and just, I have my fundamental doubt, and we can discuss it further. So what is at stake now is whether we use our chance to become Europe of the 21st century. And the threats are not about our good analysis of us being smart. It's not how people understand it. The threats are about how you feel these threats. What is called in a kind of Mickey-Jicky language is a sort of threat perception. And this threat perception is now not about Russian tanks coming to the streets of Berlin, but it's about more. For me, it's about way of life. How you understand you can go on with your values, with your principles, how you can feel you are still a free person, and how you can go on with your life as a free person. And I believe that it's under fundamental threat. Because Putin can try to push further, can try to destroy Ukraine, but he clearly understands. Without reshuffling Europe, there is no way how he can destroy Ukraine. But for him, it's also what kind of Europe he can border. It's basically his world picture. So fundamentally, to live with the current European reality, with a sense of being offended, being let down by this European reality is not what Russia gonna do in the nearest future. So fundamentally, it's over. So the idea is not to get in the sense of territory, but the idea is how to reshuffle Europe and fundamentally to exercise the new sense and new impact on Europe, to have a fundamentally different model of Europe. And in a funny way, for fundamentally different reasons, and I have to make an emphasis here, for many people in the US, it's also kind of way forward. So they don't like current Europe. They don't understand it. I have to say they have some points, and it's an interesting discussion now going on. And I'm not sure European intellectuals, but especially European politicians, are winning this discussion. We can, not ourselves, but probably during the conference, you can discuss this point. So for Europe, what is at stake? And Europe is perceived by many in this world as a loser of the 21st century, is about Europe with principle and values we believe, and principle and values we want to put as a fundamental ground in our life. If we reject these values and principles, it's going to be a different Europe. It could still exist, but it could be a different Europe. And my third point, very short one. What to do? Because I've been having many conversations with my friends, and not really friends, here in Europe, with very different people. And some of them believe, okay, yes, let's invest some money in weapons. Let's buy more weapons, and we're gonna be safer. It's a fundamental misunderstanding what Europe needs. If you reshuffle your budget, if you invest more in weapons, so what? What I learned from this war in all these years, what is fundamental is people, is people's emotion, is people's spirit, and the sense how you are able to take risks and how you are able to fight for what is important for you. Maybe in some years from now, AI can handle weapons, and I believe it will. Probably next year will be a fundamental game changer in the sense of drones, because the war we've been having now is a kind of attrition war with all new technologies. The new generation of drones will be probably all AI-powered. So the sense of this war will be different technologically. But what is important, to invest a bit more is not a solution. It's not a solution for Europe. It's not a solution for everyone. Ask yourself why it's possible to have in Finland, or now coming in Sweden, a sort of different mentality, a sort of comprehensive defense concept, entrenched in everyone. Everyone is ready, society functioning. Finland or Sweden are probably one of the most democratic countries for whatever ratings you take. Ask yourself why it's not possible in other European countries. Why Europe is so fragmented, what can be and will be used, or better to say misused, not only by Russia, by everyone. Why it's not possible to get another sense of mobilization? I mean mental mobilization. Because some people believe to have more weapons, it's a kind of substitute for having this spirit and mobilization. It's fundamentally wrong. When I've been told by some of my good friends, really, who are, hard-born pacifists, saying, Pavlo, Frieden schaffen ohne Waffen, we can't reject it. It's fundamentally, I said, you don't have to. You should invest in a sort of mentality which should bring Europe in a fundamentally different world. We have to get better in order to win wars against everyone, either hybrid or non-hybrid. We have to break this vicious circle of a kind of perception that Europe is weak. Europe is lacking any political leadership, and Europe is not able to get forward. And I believe we will. We have no other choice. The point is what kind of price we're going to pay for it, and we will, and whether we can do it together or probably in a sort of fragmented reality. The Scandinavians separately, the Germans, the Spanish, whatever. And I personally believe that the 21st century started late. Like the 20th century started around 1914, with the First World War. So the 21st century started with COVID and with our war. And either we are able to find the answers, political leadership, and new sense of mobilization and drive to get better than the others, and again to be both a player and a real beacon in the sense of values and principles, or we're going to be defeated. It's a very, very simple point, not in the sense of getting some pieces of Europe occupied, but maybe be open-minded. Because in 2008, I was sitting in the Chancery here discussing the Georgian war, and I've been told, Pavlo, no, it's nothing serious. It's a game, but we're going to manage it. I still remember this conversation, 2008, just 6 weeks after the Georgian war. And the European Union started a partnership for modernization with Russia exactly this time. It was an interesting conversation. I had a lot of interesting conversations, but conversations are just conversations. I hope Heinrich-Böll-Stiftung gonna have good conversations here and gonna get good people around honest and open-minded conversations, understanding what is at stake. And what is at stake is basically our sense what Europe is in the 21st century, and whether we can live in a kind of reality we cherish. And it's not guaranteed by definition. Thanks a lot for standing with Ukraine. It's something I especially value, all Ukrainians especially value. And I believe, and it's really my point, maybe you find it a bit indecent, but I believe the Greens are kind of uniquely positioned to produce political leadership. maybe you have some failures, and you did. I mean, I'm not in a position to start with, with 1, 2, 3, but the Greens are still quite unique. And in the world of Europe, where the Russians and someone else will try to push Europe to the right and to the left, and to burn out the whole middle, it's not about left and right anymore. It's not about the middle. But it's about someone uniting principles and values. So my point, why not the Greens? But it's not an easy point. It's about responsibility. And responsibility, I know it as a politician, is something which is a heavy burden. But sometimes you need such a burden. So it's good that such discussion is there. Thanks a lot for letting me kicking it out. And looking forward to today and today's conversations. And thanks again for standing with Ukraine.
Thank you so much. Let's sit down. Thank you. Thank you, Pavlo. Thank you so much for kicking of the debate with an impulse which, at least in my head, is still turning. So I'm pretty sure there will be some who would like to come in with questions, and I already see hands. But let me maybe start off with just one question, because I think that your outline of the situation in which we are, which is much more complex than in earlier times where we understood what is wartime, what is peacetime, what is the concept of war, what is the concept of peace. It's all overturned. It's very much more complex. We are in a hybrid situation. We are in a situation where it's also sometimes not so clear if it's war or peace. We obviously, it took us like 19 years to understand the hybrid warfare in Ukraine until the full-scale invasion happened. And the question comes up, okay, when do we realize the hybrid warfare against Europe as a whole? But your reaction to this understanding, as we're talking about the concept of peace, what could mean hybrid peace was interesting, and I'd like to just kick off by asking, maybe it's not possible to line out what it means as a concept, but it's possible maybe to name some of the conditions for some kind of hybrid peace. What do you see essential to build this kind of answer in these times? How do we achieve the preconditions for some kind of hybrid peace?
Thanks, yeah. 2 points, probably. Security, in a very oversimplified way, is about 2 fundamental dimensions. One is about deterrence. You deter someone, whether it's by punishment or by denial, whatever, or in a hybrid way. There are lots of great books about it. But what is about resilience? And what worries me here in Europe, people, politicians, all the structures, but also businesses are fundamentally reactive. They are not coming with proactive ideas. They are not coming with what actually resilient means. I have been talking for almost 3 years now about Russian drones, about cable cut-offs, about assassinations, about everyone, and people saying, okay, it's here and there. The point is whether European resilience should mean let's get prepared and let's not just react, but let's build a kind of capacity to be able to to backfire. Let me call it in a politically correct way, to backfire. The whole idea of all these escalation cycles, it's all fine. For me, the previous US administration and Biden himself was all about these escalation cycles. But if you're resilient, you are prepared. And if you are prepared, you are mentally prepared. And everyone here understands what is her or his place in the future. And it's not there. It's zero. And second point is deterrence. We are talking about missiles. And now you see missiles falling on Ukraine every day. You actually saw also Iranian missiles getting through Israeli-US air defense. Ask yourself, how many anti-missile system, not air defense, anti-missile system, Europe can produce now? The answer is zero. And for me, it's weird. Why Germany and Finland are trying to buy and basically bought Israeli or US anti-missile system? With all kind of understanding it's there for years. So a lot of points are there in the sense of investment, both mental, technological, economic investment. The answers are there. And nothing is going forward. It's like this famous report about what should be done in Europe. Everyone knows what to do. It's all structured. It's 1, 2, 3. It's not just. And nobody so far had started to pulling it off. And it's really what worries me and what's gonna get a lot of people here. So it's about deterrence, and you can deter Europe in a very effective way, and it's about resilience. But so far, both are fundamental failures.
Thank you. I see at least one hand. There's two. So I'd say let's collect these 2 or 3 questions and then come back to you also, because we have a little bit time constraints right now. So the first question is right here. Please just introduce you quickly. Thank you.
Yes, I'm Klaus Wittmann, former Bundeswehr general, and after retirement I was for a long time senior fellow at the Aspen Institute, where we were pleased to have you as a guest. I teach, first question, 2 quick questions I have. First one, I teach contemporary history at Potsdam University, and the last semester it was again recent history of Ukraine. And I started by quoting to the students something that Karl Schlögl likes to state, that we all have to go back to school because we all have taken the habit to look at Ukraine only through Russian eyes. So the first question is, do you think that in Germany we have overcome this phenomenon? And second, people like Sarah Wagenknecht and what I like to call her reference generals Kuyat and Fahd say that Russia is invincible and that Ukraine has basically already lost the war. And many people in Germany follow them. What is your reply to that?
Thank you. That's already 2 questions. We keep that in mind. There was another one right here in the center. And if there might be also a question by a woman, go ahead.
Well, is there a female question? Do you have
Not right now, so go ahead. Maybe
right.
There's one popping up, then we take it.
Very quickly, my name is Adrian Both. I used to work for the German government until a few years ago. And right now, I'm just a humble member of the Berlin Green Party. We have a working group on Ukraine. We're trying whatever we can do. Minister, I loved your speech. You were frank, but you were also polite. Try My question would be, or I'd ask you to now be a little less polite and answer the following question. What, in your view, would have to happen for Germans to wake up? Thank you.
Okay. Okay. There will be plenty of time to further discuss throughout the day, and I would propose that we take these 3 questions. So the history lesson, the question if it's already lost, like the picture, and the question what is necessary for Germans to wake up. Go on.
I mean, the Germans, for me, are kind of in between. The Germans now understand Ukraine is something else from a kind of previous perception. But if asked, what is the difference? Can you just come up with 3 points why the Ukrainians and the Russians differ? No way. I mean, Ukrainian society is horizontal. It's about people. It was for centuries. And Russian society is vertical. In Russian society, you are kind of willing to delegate your freedom, I mean, bottom up, for security and prosperity. It's a sort of a quasi-medieval picture. And I can come with a lot of such questions. But fundamentally, people understand it's a different Ukraine. But people still don't understand what Ukraine is. So you are not there, for sure. In the sense of the war, I believed we actually, so far, are winning the war. And I'm really serious here. With all kind of money, people, drive, support Russia has, Russia is still there. And not just only in the sense of territory, because the Russian idea is to restrict our sovereignty in 4 fundamental areas. It's territory, domestic policy, foreign policy, and our defense potential. It's gonna be, if the Russians are successful, a kind of Pandora box open up for everybody. It's gonna be a sort of template for all sort of hybrid and not sort of hybrid wars in the future. So what is at stake is not Central Europe or Europe at all. With a kind of, I mean, all kind of international structures and United Nations, which is still there, but seeming a bit of a joke. What is needed for Germany and Europe to wake up? Another set of crises. Sorry for saying it in a very, very direct way. I mean, as a politician and as someone having spent in diplomacy for many years, I believe, and again, Europe gonna get through a set of crises. I mean, like 2015, migrations, sort of fundamental change now of the war in Ukraine. There is no way how current political model in Europe can afford smart and evolutionary changes. I don't see it, for whatever reasons. In US, as you understand, it's possible. We can discuss why, but no, probably over a cup of coffee. But what's gonna happen in Europe is probably 2 or 3 fundamental crises in the next decade. And our point over this crisis is first to get together, because managing it together is easier for Europe. And secondly, to make it manageable at all. If it's the case, we can be firstly successful, and secondly, we can get stronger out of this exercise, and we can still consider ourselves Europeans. If not, and I'm really serious here, I mean, the sense of Europe and its existence is not guaranteed. As we have it now, there are going to be Europe, of course, yeah? But the sense how we have Europe is now based on freedoms, principles and values gonna be done. So crisis after crisis, what kind of crisis we can, of course, kind of creative coming up with ideas, but a sort of evolutionary sense with a kind of current reality, my answer is no.
Pavlo, Klimkin, thank you very much for being with us and for kicking off the debate. And it gives a lot of fruit for thought for the whole day. So thank you for bringing all this to us. And I give back to Vera for the panel and for the panelists. Thank you.
I just wanted to thank everybody and to say, look, for us, it's a point of truth. You heard it many, many times. But now it's a real point of truth, not only for us, for everybody here in Europe. And it's about us to pull it off or to lose. And thanks a lot for this great discussion.
Soll ich mit das bleiben?
Okay. Very short announcement. We weren't supposed to have a break now, so if you want to grab a coffee, please do it quickly and come back to the main hall for the next panel. Thank you.
Ich möchte nun darum bitten, dass die Plätze wieder eingenommen werden, weil wir jetzt die Podiumsdiskussion beginnen. Danke.
Hello.
Good morning. I would like to ask everybody to come back in. We're starting. Please take your seats. Okay, maybe we'll just start and the others will come in slowly. Good morning and welcome to our first panel. Peace and freedom means a democracy that favors all genders, promotes accountability, and stops costing human rights activists their lives and freedoms. These are the words of Dorothy Nyemanze from Nigeria, yet another activist of those portrayed outside in the exhibition. How can we uphold a vision of peace that is not appeasement with autocratic powers, a peace that is not based on silence or submission, but on democracy, human rights, and respect for international rules? This is what we want to discuss here in this session. Certainly a huge challenge for liberal democracy in a world where all of these values and norms are under siege. It is not only a European debate, but a global one, and there's a lot to learn from each other. I'm therefore delighted to be joined by 4 distinguished guests with very diverse regional expertise. And I start here with the guest on my left, Marcin Jerzewski. He's the head of the Taiwan office at the European Values Center for Security Policy. Welcome. Gustavo da Cunha Westmann, Special Advisor for International Affairs in the Presidency of Brazil. Welcome. Olha Aivazovska, co-founder of the International Center for Ukrainian Victory and chair of the civil network OPORAA, a Ukrainian think tank for political participation and justice. Welcome. And Agnieszka Brugger, Member of Parliament and Deputy Chair of the parliamentary group Alliance 90 The Greens. Welcome. And thank you all for being here. We will begin with a short round of inputs and questions, and then there will also be time to open the floor for your questions and comments from the audience. We're a little bit late because we're actually not supposed to have a break. But I'm sure we'll catch up. Olha, after the conversation we've heard in the morning on Ukraine, I guess we're all curious to learn from you what lessons the Ukrainian experience can offer to societies like Germany that still seem to take democracy and security for granted. So from your perspective as a civil society leader, what does it mean to restore and defend peace and freedom? So what strategies are needed, do you believe, to safeguard sovereignty and liberty at the same time?
Thank you for your questions. And this is very difficult to answer to it just from perspective of Ukraine, because we have so diverse experience in different parts of the Europe that we have to collect the common view on potential common activity on defending process. So my short answer is fight. There is no other choice than continue work, and it means that you are talking about those values which are you ready to fight for. If you are thinking that peace is just a word, it means nothing, and it's so difficult to to have positive point of view when Russians are using this word, but according to their misinformation dictionary. That's why I wanted to talk a little bit more from the broader perspective than just Ukraine. After Second World War, Europe was caught into a false sense of security by a cheap peace. It is necessary to fear was because we are human beings, but not to be afraid and do nothing means inviting war upon ourselves and allowing authoritarian leaders to build strong defense, security, economic, and diplomatic alliances. Do you know that war is the normal state of humanity from historical perspective, while peace is expansional? Over the past 3,400 years, humanity has lived without war only 268 years, 8% of its own history. So peace and freedom today means defending our rights and freedoms on the battlefield. Unfortunately, that is all the news I have for you. Lasting peace can only be built through a fair peace, when the aggressor is punished and loses. International law doesn't work without global police officers, prosecutors, and justice. But unfortunately, during this decade, the quality of these policemen, courts, and prosecutors are very low, and all of the bad guys all over the world are trying to fix somehow the global order. And we have to understand that if international legislation, international law are not working very well, that's because they are much more effective than we expected. The ineffective system of defending aggressors by attempting to find common ground with their interests and needs has led to the erosion of the fragile world order. Russia will continue to intimidate Europe so that it is paralyzed in its self-defense and in helping Ukraine. That is the reason why they are so active with all of these drones. These drones do not have any ammunition, but they are trying to share the fear that none of you are ready to fight because you want to continue to live with your regular life. But we have to understand that, again, the global order changed. And if we are having still some values and we are ready to protect in democracy and human rights, this is about our regular daily base work. So the drones without ammunition will not froze your economy, will not kill your civilians. But if you will not react at all, it means that Russia will continue to be as much aggressive as it possible. We saw such activity many decades ago, and it had a name. It was happened during Cunha period, many years ago, when Russia was trying to use so-called manipulations with territorial integrity questions. They were aggressive from the Crimea side many years before invasion was started in 2014. But each piece of the territory which will be occupied in Ukraine or elsewhere, or will be under their control, will be used as a military base for further aggression. You have to understand, when they occupied Crimea, they knew that it will not be touristic paradise. It will be new military base which is helping now to shell in all territory of Ukraine. And I'm from Kyiv, I'm based in Kyiv, and I have to talk with you honestly. Last night we have 600 drones with ammunition, not fake drones. And majority of them were targeting my city, Kyiv. My son was there. 40 missiles were used against the territories of Ukraine. And I'm still asking you, try to be as much brave as it possible, or this war will not end on Ukraine. And you have to understand from the history, which is super important for all of us, that human resources which will be occupied by Russia on Ukrainian territories will be used against NATO. Because the generations of Ukrainians, like small children who've been occupied in 2014 in Donetsk and Lugansk and had these militarization education programs, now they are fighting against Ukrainians as a part of officially as a part of Russian army. So it means that if the bigger territories of Ukraine will be occupied, of course, it will be a huge migration from Ukraine to Europe, but the majority of men and children and boys and girls will be involved into bigger war against all Europe. So let's help to stop Russia where it is now. And the last point is about justice. no peace without justice. Germany knows about that. At the same time, justice and liberal democracies and electoral democracy can be not having any tools for defend themselves. I'm proud of Moldova today. My best celebration to Moldova. Small, very small country without strong economy, with a huge problem with energy system, with a huge piece of population who are still very loyal to Moscow, who wants to have money anyway, who sell their votes, with a huge shadow money investment into their policy, into their electoral processes, won this war against Russia yesterday. So it means that even if we don't have enough resources, but we have brains and honest position that we are willing to defend our democracy, we will win. But we need to pay some prices. And these prices is about our readiness to fight for justice. Tribunal against Putin was established. Germany, 2 years, 3 years ago, when I've been in Berlin, and it was a huge debate about potential punishment because crime of aggression is visible and it happened, the majority of your MPs were not so kind with this topic. Now trial is established. Let's give it a chance to be effective. Putin has to be punished. Frozen assets, which are in Europe already, this is billions of euros which need to be spent for our common security. It's Russian money. Russia has to pay for what Russia is doing now. And the third one, fair peace, means that we have to give a chance to Ukrainians to save the dignity. Because if you believe that if we will give Russia some pieces of our territories and it will end the war, it means that you don't know anything about Russia. You don't know anything about their motivation, and you don't know anything about this war, which is a part of the general security for Europe. So Ukrainians who are suffering because of shelling each night, who are scaring because we are human beings, are ready to fight. Are you ready to fight with us? 2 years ago, last point, during Munich Security Conference, I had a short meeting and conversation with your Minister of Defense, Boris Pistorius, and he said, you will never walk alone. I hope that this nice message will transfer into a broader programs, resources, and defense sector, which will help us together to survive. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Olha, for your urgent plea. The messages, I think, are understood, is take the threat seriously, fight, and never forget justice in peace. You said there are, just to ask one question before we move on in the panel, you said that there are global policemen, however they are weak, and you talked about international courts and international legislation. Is it really that they are weak or that they are not being enforced? I mean, international law is not much worth without throwing political weight behind it, right? For it to be enforced. So do you think even the institutions themselves are weak, or is there just not enough political power being invested in those institutions?
So my short answer, both. My little bit longer answer that I defended my master degree about act of aggression during this war period 2.5 years ago. It wasn't the first diplomacy, but I had to learn a little bit more about issues of international law. And unfortunately, when International Criminal Court was established, and if you will read all protocols and stenograms of debates, you will see that even the best colleagues from the Western Alliance were fighting against the effectiveness of these institutions because they were scaring that International Criminal Court will judge their president because this state had to do something against the global order for having effective campaigning somewhere. So we have to understand that, for example, a crime of aggression was blocked by the Western countries. And some of them who accepted that it has to be punished against all aggressors didn't protect this institution, didn't protect these articles, and even fight it against them. Like Americans, they accepted that its International Criminal Court may fail their national security. And after the forming of International Criminal Court, they adopted a lot of different legislation pieces. We forget about that frame during Biden's period, but now this is regular position of US about ICC and act of aggression and so on and so forth. So we have to understand that this political issue, like political interest, is playing against the justice, and it was playing against the justice always. But we have to do precedents, because according to international practices and local practices, precedents and good examples sometimes is the game changers.
Thank you. There was an initiative last year to include the crime of aggression again in the Rome Statute, and unfortunately, again, it was blocked. But that is probably a discussion for another panel. Marcin, I would like to move on to outside of Europe, how peace and freedom resonates outside of the EU. Now, Taiwan is a context where democracy is facing constant external threats, hybrid threats. Which elements of Taiwan's resilience do you believe are probably transferable to Europe? Are there transferable experiences, and how could it serve as an inspiration to democracies in the EU and also outside of the EU?
Thank you for these guiding questions, and good morning, everyone. I feel really honored to be included in this critical conversation about uncompromised peace or peace and freedom, and what it means specifically in the context of Taiwan. From the Cold War notion of unsinkable aircraft carrier to a more contemporary embellishment of the most dangerous place on Earth, the superficial discourse about Taiwan exposes how the Western gaze around the archipelagic democracy really remains rather imperceptive of the mundane reality that it is a real place and a real home for 24 million real people. And yet, it is this mundane reality, rather than the collage of loud headlines that altogether could make up a war movie script, that actually illustrates Taiwan's democratic success story and the pathway to the political entity that it is today. The premise of peace and freedom, which we are interrogating today, is, as we were reminded in the morning, resting on the premise that peace can only be sustainable when it is rooted in civic participation, inclusiveness, and defense of the most vulnerable. On September 10th this year, Taiwan witnessed a major milestone, so just a couple of days ago. The modern republic has lived longer in freedom and democracy than under the martial law, which in the case of Taiwan lasted 38 years and 56 days. During the following period of now almost 4 decades, the opening of the civic space in Taiwan has allowed for the consolidation of a distinct Taiwanese identity rooted in inclusive civic nationalism. Once under the brutal dictatorship of the Chinese Nationalist Party, Taiwan has succeeded, and largely through bottom-up mobilization and strong horizontal accountability mechanisms, to become a consistent purveyor of sustainable peace. And even though Taiwan is indeed a Foucauldian heterotopia of the Westphalian system, I'm not here to argue that it is a utopia in terms of civic inclusion. Indeed, the archipelagic democracy continues to face important challenges related to protection of civic rights in areas including protection of indigenous rights, as today at least 10 Austronesian Pingpu communities, including the Makatao of Pingdong, continue to fight for legal recognition. It's also related to the continued fight for LGBTQI+ inclusion, and particularly the existing restrictions on access to legal gender recognition for transgender and non-binary people. And last but not least, protection of rights of migrant workers who constitute the backbone of the care work and manufacturing industries in Taiwan. Nevertheless, even though resolving these challenges is overdue, I don't believe that these outstanding tasks should overshadow what I indeed call a democratic success story of Taiwan and the laudable fight of its people to sustain, first build and then sustain peace and freedom. And although these hyperbolic headlines, to which I referred earlier, race to outnumber one another in their reports of ADIZ incursions, statistics about UAV procurement, and predictions of how many GTAMs will be needed to bolster the unsinkable aircraft carriers' A2AD capabilities, I believe that the real needs to safeguard peace and freedom in Taiwan lie not in this alphabet soup of the defense industry, but rather in safeguarding the progress made in opening and maintaining the openness of the civic space. So it is very much about democratic resilience and moving beyond just weapon procurement, as we were also already reminded this morning. And the efforts to erode Taiwanese people's will for civic participation are ongoing. The People's Liberation Army has very clearly elaborated its doctrine of political warfare, or the Free Warfare's doctrine, that suggests the necessity to continue fighting and increasing their influence in three primary areas through psychological warfare, public opinion warfare, and legal warfare. And we see it play out every day in Taiwan through information operations, elite capture, and economic statecraft. It seems to, and it seeks to, exaggerate the existing cleavages in the society and question the state's ability to deliver. The most critical challenge to Taiwan, therefore, is to boost democratic resilience and safeguard the importance of civic participation, particularly in these trying times of ongoing political apathy. Civic values that have defined the post-martial law transition and that have defined this democratic success story. And while Russian brutality in Ukraine definitely reminds us that conventional kinetic warfare is not a thing of the past, adversaries will continue to seek to exert as much influence over Taiwan without firing a single bullet. Consequently, media literacy, strong anti-discrimination legislation, safeguarding institutions that safeguard the implementation of these measures, and inclusive development policies might be some of the most powerful weapons in safeguarding peace and freedom in the Taiwanese context. And in the discussion portion, I look forward to elaborating on how we can build more bridges between the Taiwanese and European context to do just that.
Yes, thank you very much. But could you maybe just say a few words on Taiwan's economy as a part of that resilience? I mean, the economic indispensability through semiconductors and so forth, is that also a part of Taiwan's resilience strategy?
Absolutely. We hear a lot about the so-called silicon shield, so the importance of Taiwan's microchip industry to sustaining its place in the global arena, mainly through this economic indispensability. Nevertheless, I believe that in any realm of resilience, whether we talk about economic resilience or democratic resilience or social resilience, resilience of Taiwan's idiosyncratic model of only quasi-diplomatic engagements with the world, one of the best strategies for risk mitigation is diversification. And I believe that that is also a premise that is recognized increasingly clearly in Taipei, that even though the semiconductor industry remains key, it is important to build connections with international partners also in other arenas. And I believe that there is plenty of space for Taiwan to engage with international partners to leverage its indeed very strong prowess in ICT to address global challenges where we see voids left by populists and also withdrawal of the United States. For example, one of the areas that is being explored quite extensively between Taiwan and Central Eastern Europe right now is cooperation on UAVs, not only in the context of their production and use as a dual-use technology with potential application in hybrid warfare, but also to, for example, help our farmers make our food systems more resilient in light of changes to those food systems caused by the climate crisis. So, yeah, diversification is the best tool for risk mitigation.
Yes, thank you. And it's quite impressive to see that Taiwan, although it is facing all these hybrid threats, including massive disinformation, which will also be a topic of the upcoming panel, but that it's still managing to safeguard its democracy. And I believe, according to the Economist Democracy Index, Taiwan is even one of the most stable democracies in the world. And that's, I think, quite a lesson. Moving on to Brazil, Gustavo, from Brazil's vantage point and perhaps more broadly from the global south, how do you understand peace in freedom? Does it resonate with your experience? Is it what you experience in Brazil? Is it transferable? And what role do you believe can emerging powers play in ensuring that peace is rooted in democracy and rights, and not only in a narrow sense of security?
Well, thank you, Leila. Good morning, everyone, ladies and gentlemen. Really great pleasure. I'd like to congratulate you, Jan and Ima, and all the colleagues, Vera, who are organizing these discussions. I think it's super rich, and the idea of bringing new voices to the discussion is essential and fundamental. I've been coming to lots of discussions here in Europe, and most of them are way too Eurocentric, and that kind of insulates the discussion into, like, you talk to yourselves, you know, and the idea of bringing new voices is essential. So congratulations, and dear colleagues here on the table. It's an honor to be with you all. That's an extremely tough question, right, Leila? And I think the topic of these discussions today is by itself extremely complex, right? How can we, the reclaiming peace, right? Freedom and security in a fragmented world, a world in which we're having a crisis of multilateralism, authoritarianism is increasing all over, a crisis of global democracy, wars. So it's interesting that I just came back from the UN. I was at the General Assembly with President Lula, and what was supposed to be a moment of celebration, right? The 80 years of the UN ended up becoming a very weird moment. What we believe is that the UN represents, or at least should represent, the greatest expression of our aspirations of peace and prosperity. But instead, what we are seeing is that attempts to sovereignty, arbitrary sanctions, unilateral interventions, those are becoming the rule, right? So it was very interesting for those who were there. I don't know if any of you were there. So it was a very atmosphere itself, quite heavy and uncertainty. So there was no celebration at all. And that really called our attention, and that reflects what's going on in the world. I mean, the question is, what the hell is going on in the world, right? And I think no one has the answers to that. But something, and under the Brazilian perspectives, we believe that the crisis we are facing implies a crisis in democracy, and that's the focus of my brief intervention here. I think whenever we are omissive to arbitrarian forces, we're allowing authoritarianism to strengthen. And that's our greatest responsibility now, is exactly to avoid and not to let it keep moving on. Well, as you all know, Brazil is under attack. It's a different attack. We're not talking about war. Thankfully, Brazil, or South America, is a kind of safe continent, we can call it, even though now Venezuela has been under some threats, so we have to deal with it. But yet, Brazil decided or opted to resist and to defend its democracy. That means we're leaving a message that any attempt of intervention in our domestic matters, which is generally, and in the case of Brazil, supported by the extreme right, will not be tolerated. So that's the message we are leaving, which leaves us to lots of questions and provocations. I'm going to allow myself to provoke at some points. So what happened, for example, in Europe? Like in just a few weeks or just a few days, suddenly we saw Europe having an agreement with the US in which you were very, let's say, permissive or way too open to that. So why? Shouldn't we have talked first? Shouldn't Europe have talked to other countries, other non-European countries, and see how are they facing these issues? I don't know. Okay, so what's the role of Europe in the confirmation of this new global order? Up to which point, and I talked to Ima yesterday, I had the chance to have a chat with her. I believe that Europe has still presenting or let's say solutions from the past to crises of the present. It doesn't mean those solutions or those things Europe is supporting and defending are not important, but are they outdated? Well, maybe they are, okay? Those are just provocations here. In any case, Brazil has been trying to bring a new voice, a new ways of seeing the reality, and we're just leaving the message that democracy and sovereignty are innegotiable, okay? Those are the things. And that's when we say, and that's a very complex thing also, right? We can say that there is no democracy without peace. There might be peace without democracy. I don't know. That would be another conversation for us to have, like over beers, and talk about it much longer. But we fully believe that there is no democracy without real peace. Lula has just said at the UN, and it was very beautiful. I don't know if you had the chance to. Normally at the UN General Assembly, there is the President of General Assembly, the Secretary General of the UN, and then Brazil opens. It's historically like that. And then comes the US. I don't know if you watch it, at least up to Trump's speech. So, I mean, as a diplomat, Brazilian Foreign Service and President's office, difficult to say, but it was insane to listen to President Trump's speech. But President Lula did well, and I think Brazil won. We got out of the, I mean, if a country left with some positive effects after the General Assembly, I think it was Brazil. But President Lula said that the only war in which everybody wins is the war against poverty, misery, violence, inequalities, right? And we are fully believe on that. So that said, I'm going to be very brief because I know we have a huge clock here counting our time, but I'm going to just make some remarks on suggestions on what Brazil believes and what could be done, and I'm going to the peace and security side a bit more. My first remark here, however, was very interesting, and I'm going to change in that, because Brazil has been defending all over that we should decrease expenses in military equipment and increase in official assistance to development. But every time I come to Europe, I understand how difficult and how tough it is to say here. It's a beautiful narrative, but when in practice and when seeing the conflict and seeing what's going on, I think Brazil is not, I cannot come here and say, you guys shouldn't invest in defense. I think that's wrong. What you should do, however, is to make sure that the official assistance to development continues, because that's also part of the entire recipe for peace. We need to fight also misinformation, fake news, something that we are hearing a lot. I mean, what's going on in Ukraine, for example? You have to talk to Ukrainians. You have to talk to people that are there. The information we receive sometimes is very, you know, deformed or deteriorated. So we need to get official and serious sources of information. That's also essential to that. About Ukraine, very briefly, Brazil has been defending, and I agree with that, there won't be a military solution to the conflict. I think that will keep going. What you need to do is to pave the path for a realistic solution that takes into consideration the demands of security of the parties involved. Brazil has had a meeting with Zelensky. Lula had a meeting with Zelensky in the General Assembly. In that context, it was a very positive meeting. But again, we are offering to moderate. But by being far from the conflict, it's really difficult. you have to be living that. You have to be facing the war to understand what's going on. And I think Olha, she, by presenting her views, and Pavlo, I mean, it's really difficult for a Brazilian to come here and talk about what's going on in the world. We have to be very sincere about it. But you can contribute to moderate, to find the path to lead to that. And I'm concluding, I promise. Palestine is something that is also extremely interesting. And when coming here, I tried to learn a little bit about the Greens and of course, the German political situation. Guys, believe me, it's really difficult to understand. Really, that's really tough to understand how you guys work, how you think, and that's misguiding, by the way. That's tough, actually. I don't know whether it's complex, but anyway, I think we are seeing the greatest example of disproportionate and illegal use of force in recent times, and I think we can no longer tolerate the ongoing genocide in Palestine. That doesn't mean we are not friends, and actually Brazil is a friend of the Jewish people, of the Israeli people. What we're condemning is the abuses of a government that has been promoting open, clear genocide in a territory, and that cannot be allowed.
Sorry, can you keep it to the discussion later?
Nobody can say anything against Israel, because Israel is God.
Can we leave that for the discussion later, please?
But that's interesting. And just a note on that, on the UN now, we just voted, 150 states voted for the two solution states. There was one veto, and then we couldn't keep the discussion. And just the last point, the reforms, right? We need to reform the multilateral system, the UN, the Security Council. We need to reform the financial system. We need to give more voice to the Global South in these processes. Otherwise, we'll just keep reproducing a logic that hasn't worked yet. It has not solved our problems. The last point, and I promise, is about values. Something that we missed. Now, we had this leader in South America called Pepe Mujica. He was the president of Uruguay. Probably very few of you knows about him. But he was a moral reference. He was we need more moral compasses in our world. He was old. He was not a new. We need more voice, a new voice also. But something that we are lacking is people define the civilizatory values of humankind. We need more Pepe Mujicas. And that's how I conclude this. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gustavo. Maybe, Olha, you want to also reply later to what Gustavo said, but yeah, for the moment, just one more question, Gustavo. BRICS is Brazil is of course part of the BRICS, and the last two summits of BRICS saw the addition of a few countries that are not really democratic: Egypt, Iran, the United Arab Emirates, also Ethiopia, Indonesia also joined earlier. Now Brazil, alongside with South Africa, India, and so forth, are democratic. How do you balance your democratic values, your commitment to democracy and multilateralism within this grouping, which has considerably changed now with this new composition?
That's extremely difficult, but extremely wise. I think there's a lot of existing hypocrisy in the world, right? And learning how to deal and balancing. Brazil has always been a country for dialogue and open to discussion with absolutely everyone. But I had an illustrative discussion, and I'm going to summarize. I'm going to give you an answer by giving you an example. Just recently, there was the meeting of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. And if you saw that picture, that particular picture, that was quite, first of all, they were pretty much all men, no women in the picture, very few. And some, or a few, let's say, non-democratic countries were in that picture. And then we sent a representative to that conference. And people were questioning Brazil. What is Brazil doing in that picture? And the answer I received, and while discussing that at the president's office before sending this representative, was, we are not sending a person to give political support, or we are just sending someone to deal with new potential clients, potential buyers to Brazilian products. That was an excess of pragmatism, and that's really, I don't know, that was our conclusion. I don't know up to which point I can say I agree with that, but we need to be pragmatic in the current global order and not really hypocritical. So by supporting BRICS and by supporting the voice of the new global south there, I think BRICS is doing a good job. So we try to avoid discussing democratic issues within the agreement and trying to focus on how BRICS can contribute to bring the voice of the global south to the fore. And by doing so, I think we are doing a good job. Very complex. Again, we could talk about it for hours, but I think that's the point. We just try not to discuss these things into the group and focus on its main mission, which is to reform the global financial system and the global system as a whole.
Thank you. Moving on to the German and Green perspective. Agnieszka, which German and European joint strategies do you see that are needed to restore and sustain peace and security and freedom in Europe and beyond? What investments must be made? And how do we balance deterrence and defense and protect democratic freedoms at the same time? Huge question, yes. But I'm sure you have some ideas.
So thank you very much. But I want to start, because there are a lot of questions, a lot of terms, how to describe this new world we live in. And I think we can argue a lot about it. Is it this hybrid war world? Is it a hybrid world? Is it G2? Is it G-? Is it G1? I think it's very interesting, but I fear the clock is ticking and we have no time to agree on the terms. But let me say just one thing. I hate the term which is used in the German debate, and it was introduced in the German debate very late, of hybrid threats. Because what is this? Yeah, and I want to come back to the last question of the Q&A session, when Germany would realize what's happening. I would say, when it would wake up, yeah, I would say maybe when your parliament is hacked would be a good moment. Yeah, and this was 10 years ago when Russia hacked the German Bundestag. And this was at a time where the former government, Social Democrats and Conservatives, still believed that Nord Stream 2 is not only a good idea, it's also just a private project. Yeah, and I did not hack Pavlo's keynote, but the main thing I wanted to talk about today is really mentality and the mindset. And I'm not only responsible as the grandma of the German Defense Committee, because I'm really now the longest serving member of the German Defense Committee for 16 years, for the security of this wonderful country. I'm also mother of a 7-year-old daughter. And I always try to live up, does not always work, but I try it, to live up to the rules I tell my little daughter. And one of them is, never let the bully win. And this is, I think, a second term, yeah, to describe those hostile actors. They're not only global powers or like bad boys, they are bullies. And when we're talking of the mentality in Germany, I think, and I'm more concerned about the debates here in the political sphere and in Berlin than when I'm in my constituency, and I think this is a very good message. But I think the main mistake people make is to believe that you can save peace when there is a brutal imperialistic bully who wants to destroy it. This is not possible. When you look away, you lose. The second mistake I think people are making is believing that if you do nothing, there is no cost and no risk. Sometimes it's more riskier and more dangerous to do nothing than to do something that comes, and everything you do always comes with a risk. And so I think in a world where you don't know, I don't know if you are still here, Jan, in 25 years, making the opening remarks, but I think nobody of us knows how the world would not only look like in 25 years, nobody knows and can predict, and please don't believe anyone who tells you so, how the world will look in 5 years. Everything is unsure, and I think this is one point, even if we cannot agree on terms to describe this world, we know it's very unsure. It's not only fragmented, it's dangerous. So if you don't know what is happening, so maybe you can't do anything, I don't think that this is the right lesson. And we heard it today several times. It starts with being prepared, having the right mindset, being strong, being resilient, being vigilant, being aware of what's happening. And for example, this is why I met Marcin in Taipei. This is why I'm talking especially to our Northern and Baltic friends, and of course, foremost to Ukraine, and I'm traveling to Ukraine. Because in a world where you don't know what's happening tomorrow, you have to adapt. You have to be able to understand what is happening, and you have to learn the lessons from others. And I came back from Taiwan with concrete ideas how to tackle disinformation in a situation where in Germany still the debate was going on if there will be disinformation regarding the German elections. And I told everyone, and some said, oh, very interesting, and then went on and did their usual job. But we could do so much more, and we just need to start doing it. And you can learn a lot and everything from Ukraine, and thank you, Olha, for sharing this with us. And the second strategy in a world that is very uncertain and dangerous is very, very simple. It does also apply to the class of my daughter. And we heard it today as well. If you are alone, you probably won't survive. So you need friends, especially if you don't know what will happen tomorrow and what will the bully do tomorrow to you. And you have to find strategies to not be alone, to have friends, not only to help you out if you are attacked or are in crisis, but to deter, to tell someone, if you mess with me, you mess with every one of us. And this is the whole basic concept of the European Union and of NATO. And I think, of course, it's about strengthening these institutions, not with debates about reforms, but really getting them to be able to act and to face up to the challenge, but also to build alliances, because I have a lot more ideas, but I think that's something that is always also missing in the debate. And what I love about this panel, that, for example, the threat to Taiwan is discussed as something that is happening in the Indo-Pacific. And the brutal Russian war of aggression in Ukraine is discussed as is happening on our continent. But they are interconnected. And this is why we have to build alliances with everyone who is not willing to let the bully win.
Thank you. Maybe to follow up on exactly this point, so what could joint strategies be? Martin, you said earlier this is something you would actually like to talk about. So maybe you jump in.
Absolutely. As much as I understand that you might be hesitant to work with the conceptual framework of hybrid threats, just indulge me as I propose that Taiwan and Europe could work more precisely on addressing hybrid threats. So activities in...
But I didn't explain. I hate it because these are not hybrid threats. They are attack on our country, on our people, on our infrastructure, and we should say this.
So precisely as I mentioned that some of the biggest threats that Taiwan experiences right now stem from information operations, or FIMI, as we like to call it in Europe. They stem from elite capture, and they stem from economic statecraft. These are the very same sets of challenges that we might ascribe to Russia in Central and Eastern Europe, not only in Ukraine, but also across the eastern flank of NATO, and so on. So I believe that there is a lot of potential to without giving up on European One China policy, engage in very practical, technical, expert-level exchange of best practices between Taiwan and Europe. And looking at this issue from the perspective of someone who is based in Taipei, even in Taiwan we see growing confluence of strategic interests between Russia and China that has a very practical dimension. So for example, in information operations, we see that some of the very classical Russian FIMI narratives are seeping into Taiwanese information space as well. And some of the best examples came in the beginning of 2024, when Taiwan, within the framework of its new southbound policy, which is essentially a strategy of regional engagement with South and Southeast Asia, signed a migrant labor mobility agreement with India. And suddenly we saw a wave of extremely exclusionary racist narratives about Indian people in Taiwanese media, saying that Indian people being physically present in Taiwan would be a threat to our Taiwanese women, which fully resonates and fully replicates Russian narratives that we can classify as identity-based disinformation. So I fully echo what you said in the sense that these are very interconnected. So I believe it is extremely disappointing to hear that in the United States, dignitaries are trying to do away with this idea of two regions, one theater, because as much as we may want to indulge the realm of far-right ideas that they're trying to perpetuate, this is still very much a reality, and there is still a lot of willingness in Taiwan to engage in that. And just one very small point, because Gustavo, I fully second your idea that we need to keep investing in official developmental assistance. I have recently concluded a major study on the Global Gateway Initiative and the opportunities to make it more inclusive by bringing other partners on board, and I believe that for one, Taiwan is a viable partner for implementation of Global Gateway, given its history dating all the way back of 1952 of providing very high-level technical assistance in various areas, from agriculture to public health, also leveraging ICT prowess in domains such as digitization of public healthcare. There was a very successful program like that in Paraguay to bring in the Southern Cone perspective. So there's plenty for us to do, even though Taiwan remains a political hot potato.
Yes, and it's particularly sad that development assistance is dropping everywhere. And we talk a lot about US aid and the withdrawal of the United States, but even in European countries, development cooperation is being downsized. And given the amount of conflicts we have and the human security needs that we have, it should definitely not happen. Agnieszka?
And this is happening in Germany right now. We just came out of the budget discussions last week in Parliament. And because I did not answer your questions about the investments, because I think, as Pavlo said in his keynote, it's not only about weapons, and I would add it's not only about money. And of course it was necessary, and I worked with many colleagues very long, and it was like the last possible moment in the lame duck session when we changed together Conservatives, Greens, and the Social Democrats, the German constitution, and reformed the so-called debt brake. And security is not only about like military hardware. And this was the first proposal we got as a Green Party. And of course, we have to do something about the climate crisis, which also is escalating, and we have to deal with all these consequences. But we also achieved in the negotiations that the military support for Ukraine was excluded from this specific construction of the so-called debt brake, and also disaster relief, civil protection, and like all the important investments you need to make to become resilient. And of course, and this is where we have not been successful, is development. Because again, if you want to have many friends in a very unsure world, you have to be a reliable partner. So if you start cutting all these programs, and I'm a member of the Green Party, I do not like to see people starve if we could help, but it is also a geopolitical and a very, very rational interest, not cutting, but increasing things like development.
Yes, and also being a reliable partner for civil society across the world, right? Because in the face of rising authoritarianism and right-wing movements, we definitely need this global alliance. Not only them need it, but also ourselves. Olha, would you like to add?
Yes. First of all, I'm totally agree with all of your messages and statement. And I have to say that there is no any hybrid war. So let's do not use these informational, psychological operations formed by Russia in Ukraine in 2014, 2015. So no hybrid war at all. There are different stages of the war. So you have such stage we had in 2014 and even before, when it was a scandal with some military equipment, which maybe was sailed by that presidential administration to Iran. And you know that it wasn't happened. So the history looks like that. For having separatization of Ukraine from Western world, Russians organized special operation, and it was a part of this hybrid war. And I have to say that there are different types of the potential collaboration between different parts of the world. I believe that the new war, this ongoing war, has to have as much professional and specialists in IT and new technologies as it possible. And exchange between universities and special development groups will be very helpful, because even the drones which are using on the battlefield now in Ukraine are not very valued in a perspective of a half a year, because everything is changing on the daily basis, and new technologies is growing the capacity from both sides, from Ukraine and from Russia. You may know that Russia involved more than 10,000 of Northern Korean soldiers, not because they need 10,000 more soldiers, but because Northern Korea is learning from this war for having their capacity and skills when they will be ready to aggress against Southern Korea. And then it will not be just, European conflict at all, because it is not just European conflict. China is having there, on the battlefield, military specialists. They don't have thousands of soldiers, but they are learning everything from this war. Are you doing the same? I'm not sure from 100%. My colleague from paramedic institutions who are doing amazing things on the 0 point during the battle, so they are saving the lives of the soldiers under the FPV drones attacks and so on and so forth. This is something extra new. When they heard some months ago that NATO wants to have more specialists in Ukraine, the reaction of these specialists was have I trained them too? Because they have to train each and every soldier how to save their life by themselves, because sometimes you need days for having medical care if you are on the battle, because all of these drones are not given a chance to, to relocate the person. That's why each of the soldiers needs to be ready to help themselves in an effective manner. That's why paramedics are very important as professionals now. I have to say that I visited some years ago Taipei. I will not say when, because it will be too in detail. But I have to say that I don't see any differences between what Russia is doing in our region and what China is doing there. And first of all, it's about electoral and political processes too, because it's much more cheaper to occupy the brains of your voters or to change narratives or content across the facts. So what they are doing with our minds, They are not changing the facts. They are changing the content. And that's why the narratives cross the same fact, like peace or hybrid war and so on and so forth, or even drones close to the airports all over Europe are changing the solutions of these people or decisions or conclusions of regular people who are not aware in details how it will work in the future. Like drones attacking your airports. That's why there are two types of conclusions: to help Ukraine to be more effective and to stop Russia there, or to save everything in Europe, to support those populistic politicians who will solve the problem in 48 hours, and then to believe that everything will be fine. No, we can be believers, but if we are not doing in effective manner everything, again, their influence, FIMI, interference, it doesn't matter, we will not survive. And that's why when I mentioned Moldova, I have to say it was not happened like that because people voted for a pro-European choice. No, it was because ruling party and Sandu's government was super tough, because they saw that if you will not fight against each piece of the influence of Russia, you will not survive at all. They imprisoned those people who took Russian money. They re-registered those parties who were Russian agents. First of all, one party, but another lost the chance to take their votes and to have broader coalition then. They my English is not perfect for sure, but they built, sorry for my using this word, but those voters who took Russian money. So that's why when it was in each of the media that we know about everyone who took Russian money, those people who took Russian money didn't came to polling stations. So, and this is important to remember that for Ukraine and for this region, if NATO will not be active in the future, it's possible during this current administration in US for sure. Are you ready to fight tonight? It was a message of NATO many decades before. Are you ready to fight tonight without US? Ukraine didn't got the military financial aid more than half a year from Congress. You know about that. And it was the first case when me personally, I was a part of Minsk process for 2 years. I know everything about Russians and how they are working with narratives in shadow room, how these negotiations looks like, how this peace deal may looks like if it will be according to Russian strategy. But according to my feeling and understanding, we have to not to be ready just to fight, but to understand that we still are winning. Just read the article of from Financial Times, one of the philosophers. He wrote the article, Ukraine is winning the war. And why? Because it's about statisticians, it's about everything. So I have to say that military aid and development of creative solutions for this war is a topic where there are a lot of different potential partnership. International interference of Russia, China, and others who are willing to change the mind of your societies closer to the elections is a top priority for each of the countries. For Ukraine, the top priority is EU integration. Excuse me, but this is about security guarantees for sure. And I hope that coalition of willing will transform into coalition of acting, because it's good to have a will, but it's better to have some success.
Olha, you spoke about how these authoritarian actors are learning from each other, how they're also cooperating, supporting each other. Is there also, maybe question to the other panelists, is there also prospect for more cooperation amongst democracies to also learn from each other? We talk a lot about the authoritarian playbook, how it's being played out everywhere. You spoke about Moldova. Is that a model also to learn from? are we not talking enough to each other as democracies and trying to kind of strengthen each other? Maybe Gustavo?
I think no. I think we should be talking more. But that's one of the things I again provoke the role of Europe within this process. I think we need some leadership in this process. Brazil is trying to do its role. It's trying to promote this dialogue somehow. But I believe, considering the complexity of the current global order and the need to reposition, to re-understand the role of each player in this new configuration, some areas and some parts of the world are still struggling to identify their new identity. And I really believe Europe should be playing a more active role in this sense. Again, thinking about new narratives that would involve new actors and promote new solutions to the current problems instead of insisting on old narratives. So I think there's plenty of room for democracies to talk to. And that's interesting, because what you are seeing is that meanwhile, while we are taking too long to organize our narratives, the democratic narrative, I think other new players are occupying this vacuum that we are leaving behind and playing a very active role in very different countries. So I would go very pragmatically to, I was just talking to him about this example yesterday. So recently some years ago, I was in, oh my God, what's Praia? It's Cape Verde, Cabo Verde. And we're negotiating as Brazilians. We're lending them like $1 million. It's absolutely nothing, okay? And we're like government, ministers level negotiating like $1 million. It took us 6 months to negotiate, $1 million, which is nothing. Meanwhile, the first time I went there to negotiate, the Chinese arrived to start building a bridge. 6 months later, the bridge was already done, and they were building the new town hall. So there's something wrong in these processes. We need to adjust and better understand how to deal with this new global order. But there's plenty of room for democracies to talk more and increase their partnership.
But I would say it's not only about talking, because we have an advantage when it comes to the autocracies, because we have like institutionalized forums and we love them, the United Nations, NATO, European Union. And I think it's really about acting. For example, when Lithuania was coerced by China, where was the European Union? Where was Germany? Yeah. When Australia was coerced by China, where were we? So like, if you have to face the bully alone, you will lose. But if you form like a strong bond and can rely on each other, and I think this is the true advantage democracy and multilateralism has, because it's built on trust. These autocracies, they always try to cooperate, but in the end, Russia and China cannot really rely on each other. And China is hacking Russia and Ukraine to learn, as you said, from this war to prepare for its next aggression. And this is what democracies and multilateralism is. And we tend to look at our problems, talk a lot about it, but we don't see our advantages, and we don't do enough to strengthen them and to use them. And I think this is what should be done, not a lot more talking, because the best practices are out there. We just have to do it.
I mean, that also counts for Gaza, I guess. Gustavo mentioned it. Germany continues to block EU sanctions against Israel. If we speak about bullies, then we should probably also be consistent. And I would just like to maybe quote from the paper of Robert Benson that we have on our website. Jan mentioned it in his welcome. He proposes 3 pillars for a peace discourse that resists authoritarian capture. First, peace must be defined as justice, not surrender. I think you've spoken about it on the panel. Secondly, security must be understood in human terms. We have also spoken about it. And third, consistency matters. So Western actors or democracies will only be credible when they point to grave human rights abuses and violations of international law everywhere, also amongst their allies. Would you like to, maybe as a last round, comment on this? Is there anything that is forgotten here? Is there another pillar that should be part of peace, in security and peace, peace and freedom? Is there anything you would like to add or challenge? Olha?
I see that you are not very happy that I took microphone, but I have to say that the common investment, it has to be effective because it's like a common ownership. It's better to invest resources into startups and to fail something, but maybe to produce something together which will change the game. There is a great Danish model. It's about Denmark is investing resources into Ukrainian defense sector, but of course it will be like commonly produced. This is about everything. I had few days ago the debates in Brussels in Parliament with support of European Platform for Democratic Elections, and it was nice to listen in how European Union is ready to fix the rules about social media and political advertising. It's nice to hear, but are you really believe that TikTok produced by China or Telegram produced by Russia will be fixed just according to law or some amendments or some regulars, changes of regulations? No, I think that Europe and democracies have to try to develop the social media and channels of communication, and it has diverse a little bit these propagandistic channels which are used by bad guys all over the world. And the last point, let's read books. So Anne Applebaum wrote the great book about authoritarian ink. And everything which is happening with us, with authoritarian regimes, are so predictable. So there is no anything unpredictable if we will not willing to act. And the worst authoritarian regimes all over the world, in each of the continent, will work together because we are living in 21st century when economy is global, financial resources is global, when the global order doesn't work at all because each of the institutions has them as the blocking actors. In a Security Council in UN will not have will not play any role with China and Russia in Security Council at all, and this is about each and everyone. That's why there is no other organizational framework which can help us to survive, because it's existential war for democracies, global war, than to work together on solutions from technical point of view, economical, in defense sector, in communication sector, and so on and so forth.
Thank you. Yes?
So that's very brief, but I cannot conclude without mentioning that. So you were asking some other conditions to peace and security. Of course, development as a condition to peace, I think we all agree that that's really related. And as part of development, Brazil has been pushing on the agenda of climate justice, and we're at a conference at Heinrich-Böll Foundation, the Greens, so I should not leave without mentioning that. So we are hosting the conference on climate change this year. And why am I mentioning that into a context of this peace security discussion? Because that's probably one of the greatest challenges we're going to face in the next years, decades, and centuries. And if we do not start acting now, the consequences will be as tragic as the ones we're facing in the current days, or even much worse due to its consequences, the migrations it's going to result in. So we need to start acting now, and the message Brazil is trying to advance in the COP conference that it's time to act. It's the COP of implementation. So we've been discussing too long, and that goes in line with what Agnieszka just said. And thanks for complimenting my answer. Yeah, we need to maybe stop talking too much and start acting now. And I believe that's the message. So I kind of take this chance to invite us all to also think on the climate agenda as part of the entire complex game of war, peace, security.
Thank you. I would like to open to the audience. Okay, I see 3 hands. Start, please, yeah. We don't have much time. I ask you to please be very brief and introduce yourselves. Thank you.
Okay, Ron Golds, member of the general public in this room. Thank you for your statistics about war and peace in the world. Unfortunately, bullies can, in history, win again and again and again, just pragmatically stated. Secondly, we have the recognition of the state of Palestine, okay by me, but it doesn't exist. Do we have the recognition of the state of Taiwan? The bullies winning. States don't recognize Taiwan, diplomatically, if you understand what I mean, because the bully China is next door, and if I may quote Clinton, it's the economy, stupid. And the Chinese economy is more important than recognizing Taiwan. Secondly, democracy in danger. We defend democracy, but democracy is producing Meloni, Le Pen, AfD, Farage, Denmark, Sweden. So democracy is producing right-wing, and in America it succeeded. It was a democratic election, Trump won. So you keep talking about democracy, but forgive me saying again, it's the economy, stupid, because that's why they're winning.
Thank you. Yes, you were the next one, and then over there.
Yeah, thank you, Richard Herzinger, journalist and analyst in Berlin. My question goes to Gustavo Westmann. If Brazil and your president, Lula, are really such champions of democracy and sovereignty, how come that they are strengthening their ties with the authoritarian and totalitarian powers, China and Russia, in the framework of BRICS and otherwise, and why are they failing or refusing to support, clearly line up and support Ukraine, which is the victim of a genocidal war of annihilation? And why are you instead calling Israel's war against Hamas a genocide, while not mentioning that Israel was the victim of a genocidal attack by a terror regime in Gaza, which very purpose is to annihilate Israel? To sum up my question, how hypocritical can one be? Thank you.
There's a lot to be said about that. There's one more here, and then I think we'll conclude. I think he was first, yeah. Okay, start, because you have the microphone.
Okay, thank you very much. I feel there is a lot of agreement on the panel, but especially when it comes to Taiwan, Marcin, you know, I mean, we love talking about like how we all align when it comes to democratic values, that you also mentioned that there is an interconnectedness of the theaters when it comes, for example, to North Korean troops in Ukraine. But I mean, you know that many countries in the region, while they might agree in theory, they don't agree or they don't act in practice. I think we have some Korean speakers here who will tell you that it's not necessarily that the current Korean government or even like the Korean public want to fall in line with that they see Ukraine, for example, as their problem. We have the problem that both Japan and Korea have, I mean, even while we can talk about democracy and supporting democracy and like other measures that you've mentioned, without the military might of the Americans, not only the Japanese and the Koreans are helpless, but the Europeans are as well when it comes to a conflict in Taiwan. So I feel it's very hard to solve this. Second point, to Agnieszka, I very much agree with the idea of that we have to work on the mindset. But what I'm missing in the moment a bit is, for example, when we look to Sweden, which is a very democratic country, which is a very gender equal country, in the moment my feeling is the debates that we have around okay, maybe our pacifism of the past was a bit naive or a bit maybe had some holes. now we have to concentrate on like the military side, which I agree is necessary, but we are not concentrating on what a pure concentration on this military question will do to society, for example, when it comes to gender equality. And that is, gender equality is one part, but there are other parts. And I feel this is something where the Greens should play a part and have a discussion on what this new way of pacifism could mean. Last point, looking at BRICS, I have a problem with like seeing neo-colonial powers such as Russia and China really as part of the global south.
Thank you. And then a last question over there.
Referring to the last point, BRICS, no comment about it. If we have to try to counterbalance forces, and you said, you referred very often to the bullies, let's say that we have to find, forces to defend our values as well. And Brazil, as you said rightly, and your president took the floor at the UN, defends certain values. And when we in Germany look at Latin America, I think we have a lot of hopes. And there is a bully working very hard inside Latin America, getting more and more importance. And the people, for certain reasons, of course, they look at what is getting more wealth generated by, and thinking that China contributes in Latin America very well. Peru as an example, for example. I say, why is Brazil not taking over a more leading role inside Latin America? Let's say we have enormous hopes with Mercosur, for example, and Europe needs, of course, allies in other continents. And to counterbalance, institutions you said supposedly will generate more importance in recreating, the geopolitical parallelogram of forces. I have certain doubts about BRICS.
Before we conclude with the round here, I would just like to say a few words on genocide, because I don't think we should exchange opinions on genocide. Genocide is a crime. There is a genocide convention signed by more than 150 countries in the world. Germany is one of them. There's a charge at the International Court of Justice by South Africa, and the court has said that the charge is plausible. There are several temporary measures. There was no. Yes. I'm not finished yet. There were a couple of provisional measures to, for example, allow humanitarian aid into Gaza, which have not been followed. And now there was a UN inquiry and a commission that said, yes, it is genocide, based also on three issues that we don't have to go into detail here. And all major human rights organizations in the world, and also the major ones in Israel, call it genocide. And there are not activists on the street shouting something. They have international legal experts in their teams who have done thorough assessments. Yes, but it's not up to Gustavo to answer remarks on genocide. This is why I wanted to give these preliminary remarks. Shall we do the round on the questions by the audience? Sure. Yeah.
Indeed, the state of Taiwan doesn't enjoy international recognition because there is no such entity as the state of Taiwan. The formal legal entity that currently controls the free area of Taiwan, Jinmenmatsu, and the Pescadores is the Republic of China on Taiwan. And I believe that getting into the legal history of the Republic of China and the PRC after World War II is very much outside of the scope of this panel. And I just would like to re-emphasize that I very deliberately called Taiwan a heterotopia of the Westphalian system in my opening remarks because it is precisely that. It is a very different entity in the international system than Palestine, and we actually see that Taiwan is not seeking through its quasi-diplomatic engagements a formal recognition. Taiwan is seeking, for example, as we witnessed on the sidelines of the recently concluded UN General Assembly, participation at an appropriate level. So, for example, as an observer in certain international fora that focus on provision of global public goods. So, for example, the World Health Assembly, where there is already a precedent for Taiwan's participation as an observer. For example, the International Civil Aviation Organization, where such precedent also exists, and the campaign has recently concluded on the fringes of that assembly. So this would be an apples to oranges comparison, and I believe that once again, there are unexplored opportunities in engaging with Taiwan at very practical, technical, expert level that do not require any changes to our existing One China policies, whether at the level of the European Union or individual member states. And this pragmatic approach is what can be pursued, even if it's the economy stupid and we need to maintain a certain level of engagement with China, for example, given the unresolved issue of European dependence on critical raw materials or a number of other issues. And I believe that Christian made more of a comment than a question, but I do agree with the general sentiment that, of course, a strong military presence of US troops in the East Asian theater is a part of deterrence aimed at the People's Republic of China, deterrence against a possible conventional kinetic confrontation over Taiwan. But what I'm emphasizing is that we should completely do away with military deterrence when it comes to preventing an escalation in the Taiwan Strait that is of interest to all of us, including in Europe, given the, if nothing else, logistical significance of the Taiwan Strait in global supply chains. But rather, given the importance of political warfare for the PLA, which is not a national military, but rather an armed force of a political party, which is an important difference because it emphasizes the supremacy of political warfare in its strategic thinking. In order to address the supremacy of political warfare, we have to focus on dealing with the hybrid toolkit or these activities that are happening below the threshold of kinetic confrontation. So I hope that it addresses the comment here. Just 30 seconds, if I may, on whether democracies talk to each other enough. And I believe that they don't, but that's because there are very few systems that allow for really horizontal dialogue, and many existing frameworks for democracy promotion really repeat the unjust colonial structures of north to south norm diffusion, and I don't see a lot of willingness in the EU that still defines itself as a regulatory power to allow for effective norm diffusion to flow in the other direction, and it is a major problem. As a matter of fact, I think that Brazil is one of the best sources of policy innovation in some areas. It was President Lula who put in place some of the very first conditional cash transfers with Bolsa Familia and Fome Zero. And these are solutions that could help vulnerable communities in Europe as well. For example, many Roma communities in the context of anti-Gypsyism and discrimination in access to public services. But I don't really see CCTs being implemented in Europe, but I do see them implemented with great success in places like Indonesia, South Africa, India, and so on. So without dealing with and doing away with disparities in norm diffusion and the unilaterality of norm diffusion, I don't think that this democratic dialogue will be effective.
Thank you very much. Gustavo, you got questions about BRICS and about Brazil's support for Ukraine.
Yeah, well, I can see BRICS is a very passionate issue here, so we should have another discussion on that with more time, and that really needs more time to process. So regarding democracy and these questioning you made, indeed, Brazil is championing democracy, and domestically, as Marcin just said, we've been increasing the mechanisms of direct participation. We have the councils, we have all these structures that allow for, let's say, a good example of democracy inside, and we're proving that to the world now by showing that this is negotiable. But of course, we need to be pragmatic, and then we talk about the greatest trade partner of Brazil is China in the current days, by far, like by really far. So we have fantastic and great relations with ASEAN members, and we are trying to diversify these sort of partnerships. And in this regard, we need to talk to everyone, and that has always been the position of Brazil. The channels for dialogue will be always open until something extremely out of reality happens, and the limit to that is something on the questioning here we could open and discuss. But I believe BRICS, and under the lenses of Brazil, and I was particularly involved in the organization, Brazil is the current president of BRICS, the greatest narrative is that we need to give more voices to the Global South and reform the current multilateral institutions, the current global governance. I understand what you said. Russia and China, Global South, it's kind of difficult to say, right? But indeed, I mean, we need the strength of China, for example, to reform the global architecture. Without China, we will not be able to reform the global architecture. That put us in a very, that's why we need to have, that next time we put a beer, a draft beer here, and we go talk for hours about it. Regarding the influence in Latin America, now again, I'll be very brief in these last considerations. That's another great question because we have all the conditions to be and we are indeed a regional power, as you can call it. I don't like saying this way, but we are. But of course, we are seeing the presence of other countries and other major powers in the region that are very assertive. And Brazil is still a developing nation. We don't have a lot of money. Our ways of approaching cooperation are way too which is not bad. We're just like, we discuss with the partners what they want, while some other players are just arriving with lots of cash and influence in different manners of doing that. So we are very concerned about the presence of other countries in the region, but we've been talking a lot. We've been talking to Colombia, Uruguay, Argentina now is way more difficult. But we've been trying to talk and trying to reinforce the global and the South American structures and the dialogues within the CELAC and other mechanisms in order to make sure that we have our own space preserved and hopefully safe from conflicts and outside pressures. And on the last point, just, sir, we condemn the attacks of Hamas, and that, I mean, no one, I believe, agrees with what happened there. But as Leila has said, it's not me saying about genocide. It's the UN saying. And I think nowadays it's very difficult to go against a position of 192 maybe countries in the world that have agreed on that consensus. That's it. And if those are my last words, thank you very much, guys. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
I don't want to overlap what my colleagues already mentioned. That's why I'm going to focus on democracy. As for me, democracy is not a state of being, it's a process of becoming. There is no perfect democratic state at all, but it's about lessons learned, it's about collaboration with your own society, in between citizens, where there's horizontal power, and so on and so forth. And we have a chance to have success at the end, because everything like that is going on across human rights, political rights, and the perspective to participate in the ruling and governing your own states. According to General Convention about Human Rights of UN, you know that political rights is a part of human rights. So it's about being human in the 21st century to have voice. So that's why let's not shame that democracies which are now walking through these very difficult corridors between very powerful, economically developed authoritarian regimes, which are very well developed. I'm speaking about China. This is only one perfect example here, which is using resources to have soft power all over the world. Of course, democracies doesn't have such potential because they have to be caring, first of all, about their citizens, because these citizens will not vote for them anymore. And because free and fair and inclusive elections is a part of this, agreement, social agreement in between society and state. Does it matter for Russia what their citizens are thinking about Kremlin? Of course not, because all of us remember how we lived in the late 18th last century. I was born in 1981, and I remember very well what does it mean do not have money to buy bread. And do you think that people in Moscow or Leningrad on that days were be ready to be active till that collapse happened because of different circumstances, but not just from internal political point of view of society, because society wasn't a participant of this social agreement. There were not social agreements in undemocratic states. And yes, authoritarian regimes can have territorial integrity and sovereignty, because they are not caring at all about their neighbors, about their own citizens, about global order. If this order is fighting against them, they can survive and they can have profit from the crises, like Northern Korea now. So Northern Korea was under the sanctions for how many decades?
Ola, I'm sorry, I have to cut you short a little bit because we're already late.
Okay, and the core of their economy is the war economy. And if war economy will be baseline for other authoritarian regimes, it's end of our world. Let's accept like that. You mentioned yourself as citizens. You are here because you have a right to have your voice everywhere in Germany, and not only in Germany. And I'm going to fight for having the Europe, first of all, because I don't have any influence on other regions, but we can speak with them about everything on a daily basis via Zoom and so on and so forth, that there is no other choice than to develop democratic states and to defend ourselves, because this is a century of war in democracies. Democracies are not fighting between themselves. This is rule. And there is no any exclusion from this rule for now, but democracies has to fight for their state being against authoritarian regime which wants to collapse them. Thank you.
Thank you. Agnieszka.
Christian's question, I did not get it completely because I did not really understand. But I'm not concerned about like the militarization of the German society right now. Of course, you have to be always careful and aware of everything. And of course, in such a big organization as the German Bundeswehr, there are also always problematic soldiers. I know better than anyone else as a member of the German Defense Committee, but what I'm concerned of is we are now changed the constitution. We are spending a lot on defense. But when I remember the discussions, it's only one example, and with the officials in the former government about should in our Indo-Pacific deployment, the German frigate, cross the Strait of Taiwan? Or is it too big a risk? I fear, and this is also a point Pavlo made, and I think this is why, like this, we always have these discussions within the Green Party. It's about the strength of international law, not about the most strongest who rules like he wants to, because it's about the most ruthless. You can have all the capacities if you're not willing to use them, and if nobody believes you would, then all the military equipment will not help you to be secure. So again, it's also about mindset. And the first remark, I completely disagree on all the preconditions you made. Of course, in democracies, there are anti-democrats. But I would argue that they have a very similar mindset to the autocratic actors and all the illiberal ones. And this is why they cooperate together. And this is why we have seen Russian interference in the elections in the United States. Of course, Donald Trump is not only a product, and the results of these elections are not only a product of this influence, but I think it's also too simple to state that it's because of socio-economical reasons. It's very interesting to look at all the analysis that are being made, but I did, again, not say the bully will not win. I said we should not let the bully win. And I made a point that democracies are not as weak as we always discuss them. And I think that cooperation and trust, they are not only the best shield we have, they are also our strongest weapon in this fight.
And we probably have to make our democratic institutions resilient so that not autocratic actors actually come to power through democratic means and then dismantle it altogether. Thank you very much for the very engaged discussion. I'm sorry we have to wrap up here. We're already a bit late. Please reconvene here at 1 o'clock in 45 minutes. There will be light lunch served downstairs. And thanks a lot to the panelists, and thank you.